Commander Vrix stood before the great council chamber window and stared into the darkness of space. His scales rippled with barely contained tension as he watched distant stars flicker against the void. Behind him, the Galactic Coalition Council argued in hushed voices that still managed to fill the vast hall with their worry. 10 cycles had passed since the border wars ended. 10 cycles since humanity agreed to an uneasy peace. 10 cycles, and the mere mention of humans still made experienced warriors check their weapons twice. Vrix turned from the window to face the council members seated in their tiered arrangement. Speaker Than sat highest, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as he listened to the debate below. The Quellan leader had seen 300 cycles of service, had witnessed the rise and fall of a dozen species, yet even he seemed troubled today. "We should not involve Earth in this matter," Councilmember Dresch insisted, his crystalline form pulsing with agitated colors. "Have we forgotten what they did during the border wars?" "No one has forgotten," Ambassador Kilos replied calmly. The Moran diplomat folded his long fingers together. "But we are discussing survival now. 3 inhabited systems face total destruction." "Survival," Dresch repeated, his voice dripping with scorn. "The humans taught us about survival. They taught us during the Battle of Kepler Station when they refused to surrender despite losing half their ships. They taught us when they turned cargo containers into missiles. They taught us when a single human soldier held a corridor for 6 hours, using nothing but a broken rifle and pure stubbornness." Vrix remembered that soldier. He had faced the human across that corridor, had offered honorable surrender 3 times. Each time, the human simply reloaded with parts scavenged from fallen weapons and kept firing, even when the rifle finally broke completely. The human threw pieces of it with enough force to dent armor. By the time Vrix's team finally breached the position, they found the human had rigged the entire corridor to explode. Only a ceasefire order had prevented both sides from dying in that blast. The human survived with 2 broken arms, 3 fractured ribs, and a smile that still haunted Vrix's dreams. "That is precisely why we should contact them," Kilos argued. "Their military might could what?" Another council member interrupted. "Fight a gravitational anomaly? Launch missiles at physics itself?" The council chamber fell silent. The truth hung heavy in the recycled air. Their best scientists had studied the anomaly for 20 days. It appeared near the outer rim, a tear in space-time that grew larger with each passing hour. Already it had consumed 2 uninhabited moons. Projections showed it would reach 3 populated systems within 60 standard days. 15 million lives hung in the balance. "Our scientists cannot stop it," Speaker Than said quietly. "They can only slow its growth by 0.3%. Evacuation would take 90 days. We do not have 90 days. Vrix approached the central platform where a hologram showed the anomaly in terrible detail. It looked like a wound in reality itself, edges flickering with impossible colors that made his eyes hurt. Around it, space bent and twisted in ways that violated every natural law. "Earth has technology we do not understand," he said slowly. "During the wars, they adapted faster than we could counter. They took our weapons and turned them against us. They combined technologies in ways our scientists said were impossible." "Exactly," Dresch responded. "Impossible things. Dangerous things. What if they weaponize this crisis? What if they find a way to control the anomaly and use it against us? What if they save 15 million lives?" Kilos countered. The argument continued, voices rising and falling like waves. Vrix stopped listening. His mind wandered back to the wars, to the moments that taught the Coalition to fear humanity. He remembered the human ship that lost all power during battle. Dead in space, it should have been an easy target. But the humans manually vented atmosphere to create thrust, used it to spin their disabled ship, and fired their remaining weapons using backup batteries charged by crew members peddling exercise equipment. The improvised attack destroyed 2 Coalition frigates before anyone realized what was happening. He remembered human engineers fixing battle damage in the middle of combat, welding hull breaches while enemy fire scorched the metal around them. He remembered humans sharing their last rations with prisoners of war, even when their own supplies ran low. He remembered their strange combination of brutal efficiency and incomprehensible mercy. Most of all, he remembered their eyes. Human eyes that never showed defeat even in the face of certain death. Eyes that looked at impossible situations and seemed to ask not if they could win, but how. The council chamber doors opened with a soft hiss. Every head turned as Lieutenant Greg Palmer walked in. The human liaison officer moved with quiet confidence, his simple uniform stark against the elaborate dress of the council members. He stood barely taller than the shortest species present. Yet somehow, he commanded the room's attention. Palmer waited politely for Speaker Than to acknowledge him. "Lieutenant Palmer," Than said, "we were just discussing whether to request Earth's assistance with the gravitational anomaly." "I know," Palmer replied. His voice carried no judgment, just simple fact. Earth detected the anomaly 32 hours ago. We have been analyzing the data your scientists shared through the treaty network. The council exchanged glances. Vrix felt his scales tighten. Of course, Earth was already watching. Humans missed nothing. "And what does Earth think?" Dresch asked, his crystalline form flickering with nervous energy. Palmer's expression did not change. "Earth believes we can help. We have already dispatched a team. They should arrive at Zenith Prime in approximately 40 hours. The council erupted into noise. Half the members shouted questions while others argued among themselves. Vrix raised his clawed hand for silence, but the chamber ignored him. "Silence!" Speaker Than's voice boomed through amplifiers. The room obeyed instantly. Palmer stood calmly through the chaos, hands clasped behind his back, waiting. "What kind of team?" Vrix asked carefully. "Specialists qualified to address the situation," Palmer answered. "Military specialists?" Kilos asked hopefully. Palmer tilted his head slightly. A human gesture Vrix had learned meant consideration. In a manner of speaking, they solve problems. "We need soldiers," Dresch insisted. "Weapons. Power. You need a solution," Palmer corrected gently. "Earth is providing one." Vrix studied the human's face, trying to read the emotions there. Humans were difficult to understand even after years of interaction. Their facial expressions were subtle. Their body language often contradicted their words, and they had an annoying habit of saying less than they meant. "How many ships is Earth sending?" Vrix asked. "One," Palmer replied. "One battleship?" Kilos asked eagerly. "One transport," Palmer clarified. The council stared at him. Dresch's crystalline form turned dark red with anger. "Earth sends a single transport ship to face a threat that will destroy 3 star systems? Earth sends what is needed," Palmer said simply. "Nothing more, nothing less." Speaker Than leaned forward in his seat. "Lieutenant Palmer, please understand our concern. We respect Earth's capabilities, but this situation requires significant resources. A single transport seems insufficient." Palmer nodded slowly. "With respect, Speaker Than, Earth's assessment suggests you need specialists, not scale. Quality matters more than quantity in this scenario." "And if your specialists fail?" Dresch demanded. "Then we tried," Palmer said. "Which is more than you were doing while debating." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Vrix felt grudging respect for the human's bluntness. Humans rarely wasted time on diplomacy when action was needed. "Very well," Speaker Than declared. "Zenith Prime will prepare to receive Earth's transport. But Lieutenant Palmer, please inform your superiors that we are also continuing evacuation preparations. If your solution fails..." "Understood," Palmer interrupted gently. "Hope for the best, plan for the worst. It is good policy." The council dismissed, members filing out in small groups, their conversations worried whispers. Vrix remained behind with Palmer and Kilos. "Greg," Kilos said, using the human's given name. "What is Earth really sending?" Palmer smiled, an expression that did not quite reach his eyes. "You will see in 40 hours, Ambassador. Try not to be disappointed." He left before either could ask more questions. Vrix watched him go, feeling the familiar unease that humans always inspired. "I do not trust this," he told Kilos. "I do not trust the alternative," Kilos replied. 39 hours later, Vrix stood in the docking control room watching sensors track an approaching vessel. The ship was small, barely larger than a private yacht. Its hull bore scars from atmospheric entry, patched with mismatched panels. The name was painted in simple letters, Problem Solver. "That is Earth's solution?" Vrix asked, disbelief coloring his voice. The docking officer checked her screens. "Ship is requesting permission to dock. They have clearance codes. Military grade. But..." She frowned. "Sir, the ship is registered as civilian. Earth Corps of Engineers." Vrix felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Engineers? Not soldiers?" "Confirmed, Commander. 12 crew members, all listed as civilian engineers." Vrix stared at the battered transport ship as it approached the docking bay. Earth sent engineers. Not warriors. Not the terrifying soldiers who had fought the coalition to a standstill. Engineers. Behind him, Kilos laughed quietly. It was not a happy sound. "We are doomed," Vrix muttered. The problem solver docked with a gentle thump that echoed through the station. Vrix headed toward the airlock, dreading what he would find on the other side. The airlock hissed open, and Vrix found himself facing 12 humans in dark blue work suits. They carried heavy equipment cases and portable computing devices. Not a single weapon in sight. The woman in front stepped forward confidently. She was perhaps 50 cycles old by human standards, with gray streaks in her brown hair and calluses on her hands that spoke of decades of hard work. Her suit bore a patch reading Morrison, L, Chief Engineer. "Commander Vrix?" she asked, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. "Linda Morrison, Earth Corps of Engineers. We are here about your gravity problem." Vrix stared at her hand for a moment, before remembering to clasp it. Human handshakes were always firmer than expected, as if they needed to prove something through grip strength alone. "Chief Morrison," he managed. "We were expecting more people?" A younger woman behind Linda asked. She looked barely 20 cycles, with bright eyes and an eager expression. Her patch read Stevens. "K. We brought exactly what we need. Any more would just get in the way." Ambassador Kilos arrived, slightly out of breath from hurrying. He stopped when he saw the engineers, his expression cycling through confusion, disappointment, and barely concealed panic. "Earth sent civilians?" he asked, his voice rising slightly. A man in his 30s with messy hair and an enthusiastic smile stepped forward. "Dr. Nathan Cole, Astrophysics and Gravitational Mechanics. Though technically I am civilian, I have worked on 17 crisis situations. Does that count?" 17? Vrix asked, despite himself. 18 if you count the moon incident. "But that was mostly resolved before I arrived," Nathan continued cheerfully. 19 if we include the time the research station started falling into Jupiter. But really anyone could have fixed that one. Vrix exchanged a glance with Kilos. The human's casual tone when discussing falling into Jupiter was somehow more disturbing than confidence would have been. Another human, this one in his 40s with graying temples and tired eyes, snorted. "Nathan, stop scaring the nice aliens. Jake Murphy, Systems Specialist. Where do you want us to set up?" "Set up?" Vrix repeated. "Perhaps we should first discuss the situation." Linda nodded. "Good idea. Can you take us to your command center? We will need to see all your data on the anomaly." They walked through the station corridors, the engineers looking around with open curiosity. Katie, the young one, kept pointing at various systems and whispering to Jake, who responded with technical observations that made no sense to Vrix. The command center occupied the station's heart, a massive room filled with displays and workstations. Chief Scientist Morek stood at the central console, manipulating a holographic projection of the anomaly. He turned as they entered, his multiple eyes widening at the sight of the humans. "These are Earth's experts?" Morek asked, his tone making clear what he thought of that. "These are Earth's engineers," Linda corrected, moving directly to the hologram without waiting for invitation. "How current is this data?" "Updated 14 minutes ago," Morek replied stiffly. "As you can see, the anomaly has grown by another 3%. At current rates, it will reach the Helios system in 58 days. Nathan joined Linda at the display, his fingers dancing through the holographic controls with surprising familiarity. "May I?" Marek nodded reluctantly. Nathan expanded the image, rotated it, pulled up streams of data that scrolled faster than Vrix could follow. The other engineers gathered around, pointing and muttering to each other in low voices. "Fascinating," Nathan said finally. "This is not a natural formation." "We know," Marek replied coldly. "Our best theory suggests it formed from quantum foam instability triggered by gravitational wave intersection. The probability of such an occurrence is not important right now," Linda interrupted, still studying the display. "What matters is stopping it. What have you tried?" "Ruth." Morek's form stiffened. "We have attempted gravitational dampening, spatial compression fields, and directed energy bombardment. Nothing has worked. The anomaly absorbs or deflects everything we throw at it." Katie leaned closer to the display. "Have you tried turning it off?" The command center fell silent. Every eye turned to the young engineer. "Turning it off?" Marek repeated slowly, as if speaking to a child. "It is not a machine. One does not simply turn off a gravitational anomaly." "Why not?" Katie asked genuinely. "I mean, it has to have a power source, right? Something is feeding it energy. Cut off the source and it should collapse. The source is space-time itself," Marek explained with exaggerated patience. "The anomaly feeds on quantum fluctuations inherent in the fabric of reality. We cannot turn off reality." "Not with that attitude," Jake muttered, earning a sharp look from Linda. Nathan had pulled up different data streams, his expression thoughtful. "Marek is right that we cannot stop the energy source. But Katie is also right that every system has an off switch. We just need to think differently about what off means." "Explain," Vrix demanded. "Look at how you have been approaching this," Nathan said, gesturing at the data logs. "Every solution you tried attacked the anomaly directly. Dampening fields to counter its gravity. Compression to collapse it. Energy weapons to destroy it. All force versus force. What other approach exists?" Marek asked. "Redirection," Linda said quietly. She was staring at the star charts surrounding the anomaly. "You are trying to stop an unstoppable force. Instead, we should aim it somewhere safe." "Impossible," Marek declared. "The energy required to alter the anomaly's trajectory would exceed the total output of every power station in 3 sectors. If we tried to move it directly, sure," Jake agreed. "But what about indirectly? Use its own gravity against it?" Katie's eyes lit up. "Like gravitational slingshotting. We don't push it. We pull space around it." The engineers started talking rapidly among themselves, throwing out terms and concepts that made Vrix's head hurt. They seemed to forget anyone else was in the room, completely absorbed in their discussion. Kilos leaned close to Vrix. "Do you understand what they are saying?" "Not a word," Vrix admitted. Finally, Linda held up her hand and the engineers fell silent. She turned to face Marek. "We need access to your manufacturing facilities and raw materials. Also, any damaged ships you were planning to scrap." "Manufacturing?" Marek asked. "You cannot possibly build something in 58 days that we could not create in years." "Watch us," Linda replied with a slight smile. "We also need complete access to all station systems and a large workspace. Your main cargo bay would work." "This is insane," Marek protested, looking to Vrix for support. "They want to build some theoretical device with no proven technology, no tested designs, nothing but confidence and improvisation." Linda did not look offended. "Chief Scientist Marek, I understand your skepticism. You are a scientist. You work in theories and proven methods. We are engineers. We work in problems and practical solutions." "There is no practical solution to this," Marek insisted. "Not yet," Nathan said cheerfully. "But impossible just means nobody has done it yet. We are pretty good at being the first to do impossible things." Vrix studied the engineers. They showed no doubt, no fear, just calm confidence and eagerness to start working. It reminded him uncomfortably of human soldiers preparing for battle. except these were civilians with toolboxes instead of warriors with weapons. "What is your success rate?" he asked Linda directly. "These 17 crisis situations Nathan mentioned. How many did you solve?" 17, Linda replied without hesitation. "All of them?" Kilos asked, surprise evident in his voice. "All of them," Linda confirmed, though some solutions were messier than others. The Jupiter station had to be rebuilt completely, and we lost 3 cargo ships in the process. But everyone survived. "Acceptable losses," Jake added. "Which is better than total losses." Vrix made a decision that went against all his training. "You have your authorization. Whatever you need." Morik turned to him in shock. "Commander, you cannot be serious." "I am very serious," Vrix replied. "The alternative is evacuation, which we cannot complete in time. If these humans think they can solve this, we let them try. We will continue evacuation preparations as backup," Kilos added diplomatically. "But Earth will have full cooperation. This is now." "They will gay." "This is now," Linda nodded. "Fair enough. We will need a list of all available materials, especially damaged ship components. Also, any spare power generators. Even broken ones." "Broken ones?" Morik asked weakly. "We can fix them," Katie said confidently, "or use their parts for something else. Nothing is really broken, just temporarily inconvenient." The engineers started moving with purpose, requesting equipment lists, power specifications, and station schematics. They set up portable workstations in the command center, spreading out data tablets and drawing tools. Within 3 hours, they had converted an entire section of the cargo bay into a workshop. Within 6 hours, they had requested and received 17 tons of salvaged materials that Vrix would have classified as pure junk. He watched through observation windows as the engineers swarmed over the materials like insects on a carcass, sorting, measuring, and marking pieces with incomprehensible symbols. They worked without apparent organization, yet somehow the chaos had purpose. Jake was connecting power systems from 4 different species technologies. It should have been impossible. Each species used different voltages, different connectors, different safety protocols. Jake simply bypassed the protocols and built adapters from salvaged parts. Katie directed cargo crews in moving massive structural beams, arranging them in patterns that looked random but presumably made sense to engineers. She was half the size of some crew members, but they followed her orders without question. Caught up in her infectious enthusiasm, Nathan stood in the middle of everything, a portable computer in each hand, running calculations that spilled across multiple screens. Occasionally he would shout a correction or suggestion, and the others would adjust their work accordingly. Linda supervised it all with calm efficiency, moving from station to station, checking work, offering advice, solving problems before they became crises. She noticed Vrix watching and walked over to his observation post. "Questions?" she asked. "Many," Vrix admitted. "Starting with, how do you remain so calm?" "This is just another problem," Linda replied with a shrug. "Bigger than most, sure. Higher stakes than usual. But still, just a problem. And problems have solutions. You just need to find them. And if you cannot find a solution, then we find a different problem to solve," Linda said. "Maybe we cannot stop the anomaly. Fine. Then we solve the problem of evacuating 15 million people in 58 days. Or we solve the problem of making the threatened systems harder to destroy. Or we find another option nobody thought of yet." You really believe that?" Vrix asked. "I know it," Linda corrected. "I have been an engineer for 32 years. I have seen supposedly impossible problems solved by people who were too stubborn to accept impossible. The universe runs on physics, Commander, and physics can be understood, manipulated, and occasionally convinced to bend a little when you ask nicely." She returned to the workshop before Vrix could respond. He watched her rejoin her team, saw how they looked to her for guidance, saw the absolute trust they had in each other. Kilos joined him at the window. "What do you think?" "I think humans are either brilliant or insane," Vrix replied. "Possibly both." "Will their plan work?" Vrix watched Katie laughing as she welded two incompatible components together with a technique that was definitely not standard procedure. He watched Jake bypass another safety system that three species had jointly designed specifically to prevent that exact bypass. He watched Nathan perform calculations while eating something from a portable food container without ever looking away from his screens. "I have no idea," Vrix admitted. "But they believe it will, and I have learned not to bet against humans who believe something strongly enough." 5 days into construction, Vrix stopped understanding what he was seeing. The cargo bay had transformed into something between a workshop and a madhouse. The massive arrays the engineers were building stretched across half the available space, constructed from parts that had no business working together. Zenthari mining equipment connected to Muron ship engines, Quellan sensor arrays wired into human power distributors, crystalline data processors from a dozen different systems all feeding into a central hub that looked like it was held together with improvised welds and pure hope. Katie stood on a platform 30 meters up, directing two cargo crews as they positioned another structural beam. The young engineer had a welding torch in one hand and a data tablet in the other, somehow managing both without dropping either. 3 degrees left, she called down. "No, my left, you're right. There. Hold it steady. Thanks for watching. Hold it steady." The beam locked into place with a deep clang that echoed through the bay. Katie ran the torch along the connection points, her movements confident despite the dangerous height and the fact that she was welding components that were never designed to touch each other. Vrix had stopped questioning her methods on day 2, when he realized she had already solved 3 problems he had not even noticed existed. "This is remarkable," Chief Scientist Morik said from beside him. The scientist's tone had changed over the past 5 days, shifting from dismissive to grudgingly impressed. "They are integrating technologies from 15 different species. Our best engineers said it could not be done." "How are they doing it?" Vrix asked. "By ignoring what it cannot do and focusing on what it can do," a voice behind them said. They turned to find Jake Murphy approaching, wiping grease from his hands with a cloth that looked even dirtier than his hands. The systems specialist had barely slept since arriving, spending every hour elbow-deep in machinery. "Your engineers read the specifications and saw all the incompatibilities," Jake continued, gesturing toward the arrays. "Different power requirements, different operational frequencies, different safety standards. All very real problems, but we do not care about the specifications. We care about the actual hardware." "I do not understand the difference," Morik admitted. Jake grinned. "Specifications tell you what something is designed to do. Hardware tells you what it can actually do. Usually there is a big difference. Your Muron engines? Specs say they need 2,400 volts at exactly 60 cycles, but the actual engine? It runs fine anywhere from 2,200 to 2,700 volts, and does not care much about frequency, as long as it is steady. But the safety margins," Morik began, "are built in by engineers who assume users are idiots," Jake interrupted cheerfully. "We are not idiots. We know exactly how far we can push every component because we test them. Actually test them, not just read what the manual says." He pointed to a section where several power generators sat in various states of disassembly. "Those 5 units? Your maintenance log said they were broken beyond repair, but broken just meant they did not meet original specifications anymore. One had a cracked housing that reduced efficiency by 12%. Another had a worn regulator that made power output fluctuate. A third had a coolant leak." "So you repaired them?" Vrix asked. "We fixed what mattered," Jake corrected. "The cracked housing? Sealed it with thermal paste and reinforcement straps. Not pretty, but it works. The worn regulator? Bypassed it entirely and built a new regulation system from scratch. The coolant leak? We are using a different coolant that does not leak through that particular seal. None of it matches the original design, but all of it works better than sitting in a scrap pile." Morik pulled up a portable display, showing the array's current configuration. "This should not work. The power distribution alone violates a dozen fundamental principles." "Which principles?" Jake asked, with genuine curiosity. Morek highlighted several connections. These junctions are carrying 3 times their rated capacity. These converters are operating outside their design temperature range. This entire section is using harmonics that should cause catastrophic resonance failure. Should, Jake agreed, but does not. We tested it yesterday at twice the expected load. Ran it for 6 hours. Everything stayed stable. How? Morek demanded. Jake shrugged. Because we balanced the loads, managed the heat buildup, and dampened the resonance before it became a problem. Not according to any manual, just by trying things until they worked. A loud crash from across the bay made everyone turn. Nathan had dropped something heavy. He waved apologetically and went back to his calculations. Apparently unconcerned. That man is going to damage something critical, Morek muttered. That man is calculating trajectories that will save 15 million lives, Jake replied. He can drop whatever he wants. Vrix noticed a group of coalition workers gathered around one of the human engineers, watching intently as she demonstrated something with a cutting tool. The workers were asking questions, their body language showing engagement rather than the dutiful boredom that usually marked station work crews. Your people are affecting my crews, Vrix observed. Good, Jake said. We need all the help we can get. Your workers are smart. They just needed permission to ignore the rules sometimes. That is dangerous advice, Morek warned. More dangerous than certain death? Jake asked pointedly. Look, I get it. Rules exist for reasons. Safety protocols save lives. Specifications prevent disasters. But all of that assumes normal situations. This is not normal. Normal procedures gave you a 58-day countdown to catastrophe. Abnormal procedures might give us a solution. He walked away, heading back to his system's work. Morek watched him go, his expression troubled. Commander, these humans are teaching our crews to be reckless, he said quietly. No, Vrix replied, surprising himself. They are teaching our crews to think. Over the next hours, Vrix observed the changes spreading through the work crews. A Zenthari maintenance worker suggested a modification to the power coupling that Jake immediately implemented. A Quellan technician figured out a better way to route data cables that Katie praised enthusiastically. Even the most junior crew members started offering ideas instead of just following orders. The atmosphere in the cargo bay had transformed. Where before there had been nervous efficiency, now there was excited collaboration. Workers stayed past their shifts. People volunteered for extra duties. The humans' infectious attitude of problems are just puzzles waiting to be solved had spread like a virus. Linda oversaw it all with the same calm competence she had shown from the start. Vrix found her examining a particularly complex junction, where power flows from 3 different systems met. This should be impossible, he told her, using Morek's favorite phrase. Linda smiled. So people keep saying. I stopped keeping count of impossible things we have done on day 3. How do you decide what risks to take? Vrix asked. You push every system beyond its limits. You combine technologies in untested ways. You ignore safety margins that were established for good reasons. We calculate, Linda replied simply. She pulled out her data tablet and showed him streams of numbers. Every modification gets analyzed. We run simulations. We test components. We measure stress points. The difference is we do not automatically stop when we hit the manufacturer's recommended limit. We find the actual limit. And if you miscalculate, then we fix the problem and recalculate, Linda said. You know what kills engineering projects, Commander? Fear of failure. People get so worried about making mistakes that they never try anything new. But mistakes are just information. They tell you what does not work, which is just as valuable as knowing what does. She pointed to a section of the array that bore obvious signs of repair. See that? We tried connecting those systems yesterday. It did not work. Blew 3 circuits and melted 2 connectors. So we changed the approach, added better heat sinks, adjusted the voltage, and tried again. Worked perfectly. You are very confident, Vrix observed. No, Linda corrected. I am very persistent. Confidence comes and goes. Persistence is what gets projects finished. An alarm sounded from Nathan's workstation. The astrophysicist jumped up, looking more excited than concerned. "Linda, I figured out the anchor points," he shouted across the bay. Every engineer stopped working and converged on Nathan's station. Vrix and Morik followed. Curious despite themselves, Nathan had multiple displays showing gravitational field calculations. The equations meant nothing to Vrix, but the humans all nodded as if everything was clear. "We can't move the anomaly directly," Nathan explained rapidly, his hands gesturing wildly. "Too much mass, too much energy. But we can move space around it. Create gravitational anchors at these points." He highlighted 3 locations on the star map, and activate them in sequence. "The anomaly will follow the path of least resistance. Those anchor points are 14 light hours apart," Morik objected. "You would need to coordinate the activation with perfect timing across distances that make real-time communication impossible." Arbai. Good thing we are building 3 separate arrays then," Katie said cheerfully. "One here, 2 others on automated ships. We sync the timing before they launch, then trust the computers to execute on schedule." "Trust computers with timing that precise?" Morik asked incredulously. "Computers are great at timing," Jake said. "Better than organic brains. As long as we program them right and give them redundant systems, they will hit the marks." "And if a computer fails?" Vrix asked. The engineers exchanged glances. Finally, Linda spoke. "Then we accept that risk because the alternative is guaranteed failure." "You keep saying that," Morik said with frustration. "Accept the risk." "But these are not acceptable risks. These are enormous gambles with millions of lives at stake. Every risk is acceptable if the alternative is worse," Linda replied firmly. "Right now, we have 2 choices. Try our solution, which might fail, or do nothing, which will definitely fail. I choose might over definitely every single time." Katie had pulled up the array's power requirements and was frowning at her tablet. "We have a problem. Even with all the generators we have repurposed, we are still 30% short of the power we need." "Can we find more generators?" Nathan asked. "Not in time," Jake said. "We have already stripped every non-essential system on the station." The engineers fell into troubled silence. Vrix felt vindication rising. Finally, something impossible that even humans had to admit was impossible. Then Linda's expression changed. She had the look of someone who had just thought of something either brilliant or insane. "What if we remove the safety limiters on the existing generators?" she asked quietly. The cargo bay went completely silent. "You want to overload every generator on the station?" Morik asked, his voice nearly breaking. "That could destroy the entire power grid. It would give us the spike we need," Linda continued, her tone matter-of-fact. "For exactly 4 minutes and 47 seconds. After that, yes, the grid would fail completely. The station would be dead," Vrix said. "No power, no life support, no communication. We would have emergency batteries," Katie offered. "Enough for essential systems for maybe 6 hours. And if the plan fails?" Morik demanded. "You want to gamble the lives of 12,000 station residents on your untested theory?" Linda met his eyes steadily. "I want to gamble 12,000 lives on a chance to save 15 million. Yes. Because the math is simple." Vrix felt his scales tighten with tension. This was the moment. This was where human determination crossed into human recklessness. This was why the Coalition had feared them during the wars. Humans did not count costs the same way other species did. They calculated acceptable losses with cold mathematics that ignored the emotional weight of those numbers. "I need to discuss this with the Council," he said. "Of course," Linda replied. "But decide quickly. We are now at 53 days until the anomaly reaches the inhabited systems. Every hour counts." The council chamber felt smaller than usual. Vrix stood at the center platform, acutely aware that the next decision would determine whether he was remembered as a hero or the fool who doomed 12,000 lives. Speaker Than studied the projection showing Linda's plan. The numbers were clear. Overload every generator simultaneously. Create a massive power spike. Channel it through the arrays. Use that surge to activate the gravitational anchors. 4 minutes and 47 seconds to redirect an anomaly that threatened 15 million lives. Then darkness. Complete power failure. The station would become a dead hulk floating in space, its residents dependent on emergency batteries that would last 6 hours at most. This is madness, Council Member Dresch said for the 5th time. We should focus on evacuation. Oh, evacuation is impossible, Kelos replied with forced patience. We have been over this. The numbers do not work. Even using every available transport, we can only evacuate 4 million people in the time remaining. Some is better than none, Dresch argued. Tell that to the 11 million we leave behind, Kelos countered. Vrix listened to the familiar arguments circle again. The council had been debating for 6 hours. Outside, the human engineers continued working, unconcerned with politics and permission. They had made their calculations. They had presented their solution. Now they waited for the decision-makers to decide. Commander Vrix, Than said suddenly. You have observed the humans most closely. What is your assessment? Every council member turned to look at him. Vrix chose his words carefully. The humans are either brilliant or reckless. I cannot determine which. Perhaps they are both. But I can confirm they believe absolutely in their solution. They show no doubt. Belief is not evidence, Morek interjected. He had been arguing against the plan from the beginning, becoming more adamant as the risks became clearer. No, Vrix agreed. But competence is. I have watched them work. They do not hope their modifications will work. They test them. They measure them. They calculate risks with precision I have rarely seen. They also ignore safety protocols, Morek reminded everyone. Because safety protocols assume normal operations, Vrix said. Nothing about this situation is normal. Than leaned forward. If we approve this plan and it fails, 12,000 die instead of having 6 hours to pray for rescue. If we reject it, 15 million die slowly over 60 days, while we evacuate whoever we can. Commander, which choice would you make? Vrix thought about the human soldiers he had faced during the border wars, how they fought past exhaustion, past logic, past every reasonable point of surrender. How they looked at defeat and simply refused to accept it. I would try, he said quietly. Because the humans taught me something during the wars. They taught me that sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to lose. The council chamber fell silent. Call for vote, Than declared. All in favor of authorizing the human plan? 6 hands rose, including Than's own. Barely a majority. Authorization granted, Than announced. Commander Vrix, inform Chief Morrison she has full clearance to proceed. And Commander? I hope you are right about this. So do I, Vrix replied. He found Linda in the cargo bay, making final adjustments to a control panel. She looked up as he approached, reading the answer in his expression before he spoke. You have approval, he told her. Linda nodded once, showing neither relief nor triumph. Just acknowledgement. We will need to brief the station population. People deserve to know what is happening. Already prepared, Vrix said. How long until you are ready? 48 hours to finish the arrays and run final tests. Then we need 12 hours to evacuate non-essential personnel to the emergency sections. After that, we can proceed whenever you give the word. Non-essential personnel? Vrix asked. Anyone who is not critical to the operation, Linda explained. We move them to sections with redundant life support and independent power. If the main grid fails, those sections can survive independently until rescue arrives. She pulled up station schematics on her tablet, areas highlighted in green. We can fit about 8,000 people in these sections comfortably. The remaining 4,000 will need to shelter in place with emergency supplies. Not ideal, but better than keeping everyone dependent on a power grid that will definitely fail. Vrix studied the preparations. The humans had thought of everything, planned for every contingency. They were thorough, even in their recklessness. Chief Morrison, he said carefully. Why are you so willing to risk everything for people you do not know? Linda was quiet for a moment, adjusting a connector that did not need adjusting. When she spoke, her voice was softer than usual. I have 3 daughters back on Earth, 22, 19, and 15 years old. If they were on one of those threatened worlds, I would want someone to try, not to calculate acceptable losses or make safe choices. To try everything possible, even the risky things. Especially the risky things. She looked up at him. 15 million people, Commander. 15 million individuals with families and friends and lives. The math is not complicated. 12,000 lives risked for 15 million lives saved. My daughters could do that calculation. And they are not even engineers. Greg Palmer arrived with a data chip. Updated evacuation schedules. Earth has 3 rescue ships en route. Arrival time approximately 5 hours after your planned activation. Just in case the plan fails, Vrick said. Just in case, Palmer agreed without emotion. Hope for success. Plan for failure. Standard procedure. The next 48 hours blurred together. The station became a carefully orchestrated chaos. As residents moved to designated safe zones, the engineers worked without stopping, making adjustments, running tests, checking every connection 3 times. Katie had barely slept, her eyes red but her hands still steady as she welded the final connections. Jake tested every circuit personally, refusing to trust automated diagnostics for something this critical. Nathan ran his calculations endlessly, checking and rechecking the trajectory predictions. Vrix watched from the observation deck as the arrays came online for the first time. The massive structures hummed with power, gravitational fields flickering into existence like invisible ripples in reality. Sensors screamed warnings about field intensity, about safety margins exceeded, about operations outside established parameters. The engineers ignored every warning. They knew exactly how far they were pushing every system, because they had tested those limits personally. This is it, Kilo said beside him. The point of no return. We passed that point 5 days ago. Vrix replied. When we chose to trust humans, who refused to accept the impossible. Linda's voice came over the station-wide communication system. Her tone was calm and professional, as if she was announcing a routine maintenance procedure instead of a plan that would either save millions or doom thousands. Attention all personnel. Final evacuation checks are complete. All non-essential systems are being shut down. Essential personnel, proceed to your assigned stations. Everyone else, remain in designated safe zones. Power transfer will begin in 30 minutes. Vrix made his way to the main control center where the engineers had set up their command station. The room was crowded with coalition officers and scientists, all watching multiple displays showing the arrays, the anomaly, and thousands of system status indicators. Linda stood at the central console with Nathan and Jake flanking her. Katie was out on the array itself, making last-minute adjustments that apparently could not wait. Katie, return to control, Linda said into her communicator. 2 more minutes, Katie's voice crackled back. This connection is reading 0.7% below optimal. 0.7 is within tolerance, Linda replied. But not optimal, Katie insisted. Give me 2 minutes. Linda looked at the countdown. 31 minutes remaining. You have 90 seconds. Then you get back here or I will drag you back myself. Yes, ma'am, Katie replied, her tone suggesting she was grinning. Vrix found himself admiring the exchange. Even now, facing potential disaster, the humans cared about doing the job right. Not just adequately. Right. Katie made it back with 30 seconds to spare, slightly out of breath but smiling. All connections optimal. Was the 0.7% worth the risk? Jake asked. Absolutely, Katie replied. The countdown reached 15 minutes. Throughout the station, people waited in their assigned areas. Some prayed to their various gods. Others sat in silence. A few, Vrix noticed through camera feeds, were playing games or reading, determined to spend their possibly final hours doing something normal. He understood the impulse. Normalcy in the face of the abnormal was its own form of courage. 10 minutes, Nathan announced. Anomaly position confirmed. Trajectory unchanged. All calculations still valid. Generator status? Linda asked. All online, Jake reported. Limiters disabled. Monitoring stress levels on all primary systems. We are green across the board. Anchor ship positions? Linda continued. Ship Alpha and Ship Beta report ready, Palmer said. All systems synchronized. Timing will be precise to within 0.003 seconds. Good enough, Linda said. 5 minutes, Nathan called out. The control center had gone silent. Every eye was on the displays, watching numbers count down with inexorable precision. Vrix felt his scales ripple with nervous energy. Beside him, Kilos had all 4 hands clenched into fists. 2 minutes, Nathan said quietly. Linda placed her hands on the control console. Final safety check. All stations confirm ready status. Array 1 ready, Katie reported. Array 2 ready, Jake said. Anchor systems ready, Palmer added. Trajectory calculations confirmed, Nathan finished. 1 minute, Nathan announced. Vrix watched the humans. They showed no fear, just focused intensity, the expression of professionals doing what they were trained to do. He wondered if human soldiers wore the same expression going into battle. Probably. 30 seconds, Nathan counted. 20 seconds. 15. 30 seconds. Linda's finger hovered over the activation control. May whatever gods are watching grant us luck. 10 seconds, Nathan said. 9. 8. 7. The lights throughout the station flickered as power began redirecting to the arrays. 6. 5. 4. The hum of the generators rose to a roar that could be felt through the deck plates. 3. 2. 1. Linda pressed the control. Every light in the station blazed brilliant white. The arrays screamed to life, gravitational fields so intense they were visible as distortions in space. Power surged through systems pushed far beyond their design limits. For exactly 12 seconds, it was working. The anchor points activated in perfect sequence. The anomaly began to shift, pulled by forces calculated down to 15 decimal places. Then alarms started blaring. Power drain exceeding predictions, Jake shouted. We are losing it faster than calculated. How much faster? Linda demanded. 40% faster, Jake replied. We will only have 2 minutes and 20 seconds, instead of 4 minutes 47 seconds. Nathan was already recalculating. Not enough time. The anomaly will only move 60% of the required distance. It will still reach the inhabited systems. The control center erupted into panicked voices. Morek was shouting that they should shut down immediately and save the station. Others were arguing, proposing impossible solutions, suggesting things that could not be implemented in the 2 minutes they had left. Linda silenced them with a single raised hand. Katie, she said calmly, emergency bypass protocol. Can you implement it? Katie's face went pale. The one we discussed? That is insanely dangerous. Can you implement it? Linda repeated. Katie looked at the countdown. 1 minute 50 seconds remaining. She grabbed a toolkit and ran for the door. Katie sprinted through the corridors. Emergency lighting casting strange shadows as the station's power focused on the arrays. Her toolkit banged against her leg with each step. She had 1 minute 40 seconds to reach the primary junction, maybe another 20 seconds to implement the bypass. The plan was simple in concept and suicidal in execution. She would manually override the safety systems and force even more power through the arrays. The systems would not survive it. Neither might she if the energy feedback was as intense as their calculations suggested. Katie, you do not have to do this. Linda's voice came through her communicator. Yes, I do, Katie replied, not slowing down. She rounded a corner, nearly colliding with a maintenance cart someone had abandoned. You taught me that acceptable risk is anything less than certain failure. Right now, certain failure means 15 million people die. That makes this acceptable. She reached the junction access panel and ripped it open. Inside was a maze of power conduits, data lines, and safety interlocks. They glowed with energy, the hum so intense she could feel it in her teeth. Talk me through it, she said into the communicator. Nathan's voice responded, calm and precise, despite the chaos. Third conduit from the left. Red stripe. That is the primary safety interlock. Cut it at the junction point, about 30 centimeters from the distribution node. Katie pulled out her plasma cutter. Her hands were shaking. She forced them still. Engineers did not get to be nervous when people's lives depended on precision. 1 minute 10 seconds, Nathan reported. Katie, when you cut that line, you will have about 3 seconds before feedback starts. You need to be clear of the junction before then. How bad is the feedback? She asked, positioning the cutter. Bad enough that we do not want you anywhere near it, Jake's voice cut in. You make the cut, you jump back, you run. No hesitation. Katie looked at the conduit. It pulsed with enough energy to vaporize her if she touched it wrong. The safety interlock was the only thing preventing that energy from flooding back through the system in a deadly surge, and she was about to cut it. You told me 0.7% mattered, she said to Linda. You told me optimal was worth the risk. This is worth it. Katie, Linda began. Cutting now, Katie interrupted. She triggered the plasma cutter and sliced through the safety interlock in one smooth motion. Sparks exploded outward. The conduit blazed white-hot. Katie threw herself backward, dropping the cutter, scrambling away as energy screamed through the junction. The metal around the cut point began to glow. Then, to melt. The smell of burning insulation filled the corridor, but the power was flowing. Uncontrolled, unsafe, impossible power surging through systems that were never meant to handle it. Bypass complete, she gasped into the communicator. Arrays should be getting full power now. In the control center, every display flared with warning indicators. Jake's console showed power levels that exceeded theoretical maximums. The arrays were operating at 347% of their designed capacity. It is working, Nathan shouted. Anomaly is moving faster. New calculations show. Yes. We will make the full redirect if we can hold power for 90 more seconds. Can the arrays survive 90 seconds at this level? Morik demanded. Absolutely not, Jake replied. We will start losing components any moment. But we do not need the arrays to survive. We just need them to work long enough. Vrix watched the displays showing the arrays. Parts of the structure were literally glowing from heat stress. Structural members bent under forces they were never designed to handle. Connections that Katie had welded 5 days ago were coming apart at the molecular level. But the gravitational beams held. 3 massive lances of twisted space-time reaching across millions of kilometers, pulling at an anomaly that had seemed unstoppable. 60 seconds, Nathan called out. On the display showing the anomaly, Vrix could see it moving now. Not quickly by human standards, but in astronomical terms, it was racing toward the new trajectory. The threatened star systems edged away from its projected path. Come on, Jake muttered. Hold together. Just hold together. Something on Array 2 exploded in a shower of sparks and molten metal. Alarms screamed. The gravitational beam flickered but held. Compensating, Jake said, his fingers dancing across controls. Redistributing load to Array 1 and Array 3. We can still do this. 45 seconds, Nathan announced. Katie was running back toward the control center, following the sounds of catastrophic system failures. Behind her, power conduits were overloading in sequence, each one flaring and dying as the surge moved through them. The station's power grid was destroying itself. Exactly as planned. 30 seconds, Nathan said. Another explosion rocked Array 1. A support beam tore free and tumbled into space. The entire structure groaned, metal stress audible even through the vacuum. 20 seconds, Nathan counted, his voice tight with tension. Vrix found himself holding his breath. Around him, every being in the control center stood frozen, watching numbers count down while arrays tore themselves apart, and an anomaly slowly, impossibly, changed course. 15 seconds, Nathan called out. The lights in the control center dimmed further. Emergency power was barely maintaining life support now. Everything else was feeding the arrays in their final, desperate surge. 10 seconds, Nathan said quietly. 9, 8, 7. Array 2 collapsed completely, its structure fragmenting into debris that spun away into the dark. But its job was done. The gravitational anchor had already activated, had already pulled the anomaly past the critical point. 6, 5, 4. Trajectory confirmed, Nathan suddenly shouted. The anomaly will miss all inhabited systems. It is headed for empty space. 3, 2, 1. Every light in the control center went dark. The hum of the generators died. The displays flickered and went black. For a long moment, there was only silence and darkness. Then emergency lights came on, dim red bulbs that barely illuminated the control center. Did it work? Kelos asked into the silence. Nathan was hunched over a portable tablet running on battery power, checking calculations by the dim red light. Everyone waited while he ran the numbers 3 times. Finally, he looked up, and he was smiling. It worked. The anomaly is on a trajectory that takes it between the inhabited systems. Closest approach will be 0.7 light-years from Helios. That is more than enough safety margin. The control center erupted in cheering. Coalition officers who moments ago had been preparing for disaster were now embracing each other, celebrating survival. Even Morek was smiling, his earlier skepticism forgotten in the face of success. Vrix felt something tight in his chest loosen. They had done it. The humans had actually done it. Katie stumbled into the control center, her face streaked with soot and her uniform torn. Linda grabbed her in a tight embrace. "Never do that again," Linda said fiercely. "Not planning on it," Katie replied, returning the hug. "That was terrifying." "That was brave," Linda corrected. "Terrifying and brave." Palmer was already coordinating with the Earth rescue ships. ETA, 4 hours 20 minutes. They will help restore power and evacuate anyone who wants to leave. What is the status of the station? Than's voice came through the emergency communication system. The council leader had been sheltering in one of the safe zones. "Main power grid is completely destroyed," Jake reported. "We are running on emergency batteries now. But environmental systems are stable. We have air, heat, and basic life support. Everyone is safe. Thanks to Earth," Than said. "Thanks to your engineers." Linda shrugged, visible even in the dim emergency lighting. "We just did our job." "You did the impossible," Vrix corrected. He approached her, studying the exhausted humans who had spent 5 days and nights refusing to accept defeat. "During the wars, we feared your soldiers. We learned to respect their determination and refusal to surrender. But today, you taught us something new." "What is that?" Linda asked. "That your soldiers are not your most dangerous weapon," Vrix said. "Your engineers are." Nathan laughed. "I'm going to get that printed on a shirt." "I am serious," Vrix insisted. "Your warriors can destroy, but your engineers create. They take impossible situations and make them possible through creativity and stubbornness. They look at certain failure and find solutions nobody else could imagine." He gestured to the ruined arrays visible through the observation windows, glowing debris that had saved 15 million lives. "You built that in 5 days from salvage and determination. You combined technologies that our best scientists said could not work together. You pushed systems past every limit and made them perform beyond any reasonable expectation. That is what engineers do," Katie said simply. "We solve problems. This was just a bigger problem than usual." Kelos joined them, his expression thoughtful. "I understand now why Earth sent engineers instead of soldiers. Warriors would have tried to fight the anomaly. Engineers asked how to fix it." "Different mindset," Jake agreed. "Soldiers think in terms of defeating enemies. Engineers think in terms of solving problems. Sometimes the problem is an enemy that needs defeating. Sometimes the problem is an anomaly that needs redirecting. Same basic approach either way." Over the next hours, as emergency repairs began and the station stabilized, Vrix watched the humans work. They were exhausted, running on determination and caffeine, but they moved through the station helping coalition engineers restore critical systems. Everywhere they went, they taught, showed coalition workers how to think creatively about problems, demonstrated that specifications were guidelines, not absolute laws. encouraged experimentation, and acceptable risk-taking. The transformation Vrix had seen in the work crews during construction was spreading through the entire station. People who had followed procedures their entire careers were learning to question those procedures, to think about why rules existed and when breaking them made sense. It was dangerous knowledge. But then, humans were dangerous. Not because they wanted to harm anyone, but because they refused to accept limits that everyone else took for granted. When the Earth rescue ships arrived, they brought not just replacement parts and power generators, but also requests. A dozen coalition worlds wanted to establish engineering exchange programs. Universities asked for human instructors. Research stations requested human engineers to help with impossible projects. The galaxy had feared humanity's warriors. Now they wanted humanity's engineers. Linda stood in the cargo bay where 5 days ago her team had started building the impossible. The space was scarred now, marked by the evidence of desperate construction and catastrophic power surges. But it was also marked by success. "What will you do with the salvage?" Vrix asked, finding her there. "Take it with us," Linda replied. "Never know when you might need spare parts. Besides, we paid for it with risk and effort. Seems fair we keep it." Where will you go next?" Vrix asked. Linda smiled. "Wherever there is a problem that needs solving. That is what we do. We find impossible situations and make them possible." "You make it sound simple," Vrix observed. "It is simple," Linda said. "Not easy, but simple. You identify the problem. You gather resources. You calculate risks. You try solutions until you find one that works. The only way to fail is to stop trying." She looked at him directly. "During the wars, your people learned not to underestimate human soldiers. Now you are learning not to underestimate human engineers. But the real lesson is not about soldiers or engineers specifically." "What is it?" Vrix asked. "It is about humans in general," Linda explained. "We do not accept impossible. We do not accept inevitable. We do not accept that some problems cannot be solved. Give us long enough, and we will find a way. Maybe not the way anyone expected. Maybe not the safe way, or the approved way. But we will find a way." She started toward the docking bay where the problem solver waited. Her team was already loading equipment, preparing for departure. "Chief Morrison," Vrix called after her. "Thank you. For the risk you took. For the lives you saved." Linda turned back, and her smile was genuine and warm. "You are welcome, Commander. But remember something. Next time you face an impossible problem, do not just call for Earth's help. Try solving it yourself using what we taught your people. You might surprise yourself with what you can do." The engineers departed as quietly as they had arrived. 12 humans in a battered transport ship, leaving behind a station full of people who would never look at problems the same way again. Vrix stood at the observation window and watched the problem solver jump to faster than light speed. Beside him, Kilos held a data pad showing proposals for the new engineering exchange programs. "They have changed us," Kilos said quietly. "The coalition will be different now." "Different how?" Vrix asked. "More willing to take risks. More willing to try impossible things, more willing to question established limits." Kilos looked at Vrix. "Is that good or dangerous?" Vrix thought about 15 million people who still lived because 12 humans refused to accept inevitable disaster. He thought about the work crews who had learned to think creatively, instead of just following procedures. He thought about young Katie running toward danger because acceptable risk meant anything less than certain failure. "Both," he said finally. "It is both good and dangerous. Just like humans themselves, on every world in the coalition, people would hear the story of how human engineers saved 15 million lives using salvage, stubbornness, and solutions that should not have worked. They would learn that the species they feared for their warriors was equally dangerous for their engineers. But more importantly, they would learn what it meant to refuse to accept the impossible. To look at certain failure and ask not if there was a solution, but how to find it. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity's capacity for war. Now they were learning to respect humanity's capacity for creation. And that, Vrix realized, was far more dangerous in the long term, because warriors could conquer territory. But engineers could change how people thought, could inspire others to see possibilities instead of limitations, could teach that impossible just meant nobody had done it yet. The humans had left behind more than saved lives. They had left behind a legacy of creative problem-solving, acceptable risk-taking, and stubborn refusal to give up. And the galaxy would never be quite the same again.